The dust is far from settling on Sunday's general election in Turkey. The ruling AK party by far and away the winner, but failing to garner the supermajority that President Erdogan wanted to change the constitution. It's the first setback for Erdogan since his Islamist-rooted party took power in 2002. From an economic slowdown to fears the man at the top was growing too authoritarian. We'll see why he's lost votes. The opposition celebrating particularly loudly in the Kurdish southeast, where for the first time the secular left-leaning HDP will enter parliament as a bloc. But the cheering may prove short-lived. If the AKP can't find a coalition partner, so far that prospect seems at best iffy, Turks could be called back to the polls. Years of phenomenal growth and stability could give way to political uncertainty. Which way then for Erdogan and for a nation that until recently was hailed as a regional model, one that straddles two continents, and which once again could face a seminal moment. Today in the France 24 debate, is Turkey catching Erdogan fatigue? And with us to talk about it from Ankara, Muhittin Ataman, Deputy Director of the think tank SETA. Thank you for being with us again here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.
Joining us in the studio, Emre Demir, editor of the French language edition of daily newspaper Zaman.
Thank you.
Welcome back, sir. And we welcome as well Tuje Okle, representative of the HDP party we were aforementioning.
Yeah, in France.
In France.
Yep.
Thank you for being with us. From London, Mehmet Ogucu, former Turkish diplomat, energy consultant, and analyst. Nice to see you again, sir.
Bonsoir, François.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag F24debate. Recep Tayyip Erdogan descended from his perch to throw all his weight into the campaign, turning it, some say, from a legislative election into a de facto referendum about himself. Josh Vardy reports on a formidable politician who at 61 may be down, but it's too early to rule him out.
The Turkish president brimmed with confidence as he put an end to his election campaign in front of an adoring crowd. Yet only 48 hours later, the tone had changed. Voters had returned a scathing backlash against Erdogan in legislative elections, turning it into a referendum on his increasingly authoritarian rule. For the first time since 2002, the party he founded, the AKP, had lost its majority in parliament.
I think it's an end of a period, it's a long period that AKP had enjoyed ruling the country on its own, the way it liked, because it had always a good parliamentary majority so that it could legislate everything. So it seemed that this is an end of an era.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan was born here, in the neighborhood of Kasımpaşa in Istanbul. After attending religious school, the future president dabbled with a football career, but ended up in politics. In 1994, he became the mayor of Istanbul. Then, in 1999, he spent 4 months in prison for inciting religious hatred. His crime was to have publicly recited a poem with Islamist overtones, including the lines, "Our minarets are our bayonets, our domes are our helmets, our mosques are our barracks." Despite the traditional secularism of Turkey, Erdogan chose to take a resolutely conservative line when he founded the Party of Justice and Development in 2001. 1 year later, the AKP took power.
In Turkey, starting from today, nothing will be like it was before.
The rise of the AKP coincided with an economic boom in Turkey, and the party proved to be a consistent election winner. However, in the 2010s, complaints over Erdogan's authoritarian streak grew louder. In 2013, the Gezi Park protests were brutally dispersed by the authorities. Meanwhile, a tight rein was being held over the press, and social media sites were often shut down. Erdogan was eventually given the dubious nickname of the Sultan. Speaking of France 24 in March, the Turkish president denied he was a dictator.
I don't think it's fair to talk of dictatorship. It shows a lack of respect towards our country, a lack of respect towards me even.
Erdogan was elected once again as president in the first round of elections in August 2014. His party have grown used to ruling with a majority, but will now have to learn to share power.
All right, let's begin with you, Emre Demir. Are you surprised by the results?
Well, we were expecting these results since 2 weeks ago. We saw the polls, and it wasn't a big surprise. Maybe 13% for HDP, the Kurdish party. It was a little bit surprising, but after all, we were waiting some kind of a coalition. But I think this election, June 7, clearly marked the end of Erdogan's rise in politics, and possibly, eventually,
the end or a pause?
The end of his rise. He's still here. He won't let his power. But maybe it might be the beginning of the end, because maybe AKP is one of the losers of this election. But we know that for Erdogan, personally, for him, it was not just a drop of votes. It's a huge defeat for him, because it was kind of a referendum for Erdogan's regime change project. So I think the voters said it's enough. You have already too much power, and they didn't give the yes for another regime change in Turkey.
Muhittin Ataman, were you surprised, and do you agree with what Emre Demir just said?
With some part of it, yes, I agree that there is a drawback in AK Parti's votes, but there is a strong message from the Turkish nation, but still they did not give the way to any other political party. Still, by far, with 40% of votes, they are the #1 political party in the Turkish parliament. That is, yes, there is an deterioration in Turkish government, I mean in the ruling party, but still there is no alternative, at least according to these election results, there is no alternative to the AK Party for now.
And what about the man himself? Can Recep Tayyip Erdogan rebound from this?
You know, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, yes, he was on the ground. He was expecting a majority that will be enough to have an administrative change. I mean, Mr. Emre is using the word regime change. There is no such a thing. There is no such an intention in Turkish politics. You know, from the parliamentary system to the presidential system, it was mainly a fear, a result of the fear of political coalitions, unfortunately, for which the Turkish political setting is not ready yet. We have 2 decades of political party coalitions in Turkey. One is in the 1970s and the second one in the 1990s. These 2 decades are the most chaotic and unstable decades in Turkish political history. When we look at the position of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, we see that he's already a president. Yes, unlike maybe any presidential system in the United States or in France, but still Turkish president, even for, according to the current constitution, it has enough power to influence the political climate. And Recep Tayyip Erdogan will continue to do that.
All right, lots of points there to bring up. Let's first of all look at the snapshot of what the new parliament will look like. The ruling AK party had 327 seats before Sunday. There you see the new makeup, and you see that supermajority has definitely eluded Erdogan and 3 other major parties in the mix. The largest, the Social Democrats, the CHP, followed by the Nationalists, and then the ones we were talking about earlier, the HDP. Three possible scenarios, if I'm not mistaken, Mehmet Ogucu. The first one is that Erdogan does find a coalition partner. The second is that there is some sort of a minority government or an opposition government. And the third, snap elections. Where are we headed?
Well, let me just first congratulate you for the title you have chosen, Erdogan fatigue. I think Erdogan fatigue is one of the main reasons for the election failure of AKP, because 3-term fatigue or syndrome that we experience in UK and in other countries as well. If Erdogan played it right and left it to AKP leadership, staying as a president within the confines of his constitutional responsibilities, I think the result could have been different. So there was a backlash of how Erdogan handled it. And many people thought that he was arrogant. Many people thought that he was overconfident and over-empowering. And that's one of the main reasons why AKP lost about 9% in its votes. So what next? The question, of course, is very important now. It created a lot of optimism, but also challenges. On the optimism side, it's good that President Erdogan will be confined to his constitutional responsibilities. Thus, we will be going back to what we had, parliamentary democracy. And we have 4 parties which will represent almost 97% of the votes in the country. And so that's very important, representative. The second,
sorry, you say that's good, but you heard Muatin say that this could mean periods of uncertainty, unruliness. In fact,
there will be.
We saw the stock market losing 5% today. Investors are worried.
Well, investors are worried, but that's, I think, secondary. For Turkey, the primary issue was to curb the overwhelming authority of the president, or AKP, and bring fresh blood. This is going to lead to uncertainty for a while, but I think Turkey will find its way. What next? Of course, the first option is to have a coalition. With whom? Right now, each party, MHP, HDP, CHP, they will be jockeying. They will be creating negotiating positions because we have 45 days before the president could call the process off and go for early election. It's not an easy decision for coalition parties because there have been harsh words of exchanges of words and insults during the election time. And also, the corruption charges against his family and his ministers and his presidential palace, it will be quite difficult to digest all these issues by coalition partners. So there will be need from AKP's side to show more reconciliatory approach. First thing, I think we see signs of that. Some of the ministers already started talking that this is the will of the people, so we have to adapt ourselves to that.
And who do they make a coalition with?
Well, I think the first call could be with MHP, although its leader last night ruled out this possibility. He called for early election. I think this was a negotiating position. If they can agree on the fundamental basics, the minimums, I think MHP could provide the first line of support, if they agree, of course, on the fundamentals. But the other option for coalition parties or opposition parties is to leave AKP as it is and establish a minority government, support it from outside in order the daily management of the country's affairs will continue. And we are expecting a serious economic, financial disruption in the country. And if this comes, it should lap on in the hands of AKP rather than opposition sharing the blame for that. An early election, in my view, is the last resort because you have 550 new MPs taking their seats. They struggle very hard to get elected. I don't think that it will be easy. After a 3 month of honeymoon, they will decide again to go for snapshot election. So I don't believe that this is going to happen, but coalition governments never work in Turkey successfully. We have serious challenges, economic crisis coming up, payments, and also Kurdish settlement issue, as well as foreign policy issues like Syria. They cannot be handled by a coalition of drastically different parties. So you need a strong government to handle these issues. Sooner or later, we will go for early election, but I don't know how soon it could be, because, as I said, most of the new MPs will not be in favor of that.
All right, let me bring in Tuje Oklay on this. Is that the worst-case scenario? Going back to the polls, there was this surprise result by your party, 13% of the vote. If there were snap elections in 45 days, obviously the gamble is that maybe you wouldn't get as many votes this time.
I hope so, and I think so. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we will have an early election, we will have much more votes, I believe. because already HDP was the main opposing party for the last elections, for the last parliament, I mean. So I think that I don't know if it's going to be good for Turkey, but for our party, it's gonna be.
So what's the best case scenario? What would you like to see happen?
For the moment, I cannot say because, but the only thing that I want to add, we may have a stable economy and social life with coalition governments, so we shouldn't threaten people with.
Coalition governments can work.
Yes, can work. So there shouldn't be an obstacle in the minds of the people.
Emre Demir?
Oh, I don't agree. I don't agree with the thesis that we are entering into a period of uncertainty or a chaos. I think it's a period. It could be a period of transition and normalization in Turkish politics. Erdogan has the control, a strong control over the judiciary, over the state contracts, over the press especially. So I think it will be a period of normalization. And I see also the early elections the most possible scenario, but between the opposition parties, there is only one common subject. It's the hate of Erdogan or anti-Erdogan stance. So I think they will try to make pass some legislative reforms to limit Erdogan's power. Maybe about his budget, his palace. About his palace, there would be some legislative reforms before going to early elections.
So are you suggesting that the AKP would fare better if Erdogan wasn't?
Of course, it was actually Erdogan's fault. He threw himself into the election campaign. He made worse for AKP because if we had an AKP campaigning for themselves for another term, it would be different. It was Erdogan's stance. The palace, especially the palace with 1,000 rooms, caused really a backlash, an important backlash from the society. And we must say that HDP, pro-Kurdish party, got 13%, but an important part of it was a reaction vote to Erdogan's willing to change the regime in Turkey. He wanted to end the parliamentary system, to make it constitutional change, to pass a presidential system. So it was a regime change, and people said no.
All right, I want to get Muhittin Adaman's reaction to that, but we're going to have to first take a very quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.